The Imperial Council Part 5. Since the clerks did not take minutes of the discussions, it is impossible to know how the council arrived at its decisions. Sometimes, however, it is clear how a particular item came onto the agenda, since the opening section in each decree of the Imperial Council lays out the reason for its issue. This was often the receipt of a letter or the arrival of a messenger from a provincial or other authority, whose message the decree repeats in summary. For example, a command of 1564, ordering the Governor-General of Anatolia to provide troops to serve in the Governor of Mentish's galleys, begins, "The Governor of Mentish, Ahmed, may his glory endure, has sent a man to make it known that soldiers are necessary for the galleys, which were given to the aforenamed for the defense of the seashore." The decree answers Ahmed's request. 41 other decrees state simply that the problem which the command addresses had been heard about in Apos. Many, however, give no indication at all as to why that particular issue had come to the council, nor do they give any hint as to the background of a major decision of policy, such as the declaration of war. All decrees have a standard format, which remained in use to the 19th century. After naming the addressee, the first section lays out the reason for issuing the order. This often gives the summary of an incoming message or petition, probably in the form in which the memorandum writer had drawn it up for presentation to the council. The order itself follows, beginning always with the formula, "I have commanded that." The first-person format is a reminder that the decree, even if in practice it represents a decision of the council, comes from the Sultan, on whose behalf the Imperial Council was acting. At the head of the document stands the Sultan's cipher, guaranteeing its authenticity and emphasizing its gravity. At its foot are the date and place of emission. 42. The fact that the Imperial Council had no independent power and that all the documents that it issued, whether letters, decrees or patents of appointments, were in the Sultan's name, raises the question of the role which the Sultan played in its deliberations and discussions, when he did not attend its sessions in person. He obviously could, if he wished, ignore the council altogether. He could also send formal messages to the council. The so-called Law Book of Mehmed II, of which this section probably dates from the late 16th century, lays down a procedure for communication. For some matters, the Aga of the gate should give news from me to the outside via the steward of the gatekeepers, who should inform my viziers, my military judges and my treasurers. In this way, the Sultan could, from the seclusion of the inner palace, determine the Imperial Council's agenda and try to enforce his own will. Most important, however, were the Sultan's interviews with the Grand Vizier. Lutfi Pasha stresses that no one, not even other viziers, should know the secrets between the Sultan and his chief minister, and appends a story of how Selim I had dismissed the Vizier Mizi Pasha after he had dared to ask the Grand Vizier, Piri Pasha, the contents of a recent discussion with the Sultan. A memorandum from the Grand Vizier Mehmed Pasha requests an audience with Ahmed I. 1603-17 in order to present to him some unspecified military matter. 43 And presumably all Grand Viziers sought private audiences with the Sultan. In Postel's account of the Imperial Council, it was also the Grand Vizier who presented the results of its deliberations to the Sultan. Luigi Bassano, however, also writing in the mid-16th century, gives a different account. In his version, after its deliberations, the entire council appeared before the Sultan in the Hall of Petitions, behind the Gate of Felicity leading into the Third Court. Here, the military judge of Ramilia spoke first and, after him, the Grand Vizier, presenting all the business of the council which needed to be referred to the Grand Turk and Apos. The Venetian Ottaviano Bon, writing in 1600, follows Bassano's version. The standardized format of decrees makes it difficult to assess whether or not the Sultan was in fact involved in making the decisions which they embody. Most routine promotions and appointments probably remained effectively within the gift of members of the council, even though they required the formal ratification of the Sultan. It is unlikely, too, that the Sultan took an interest in every decree which the council issued in his name. It is, however, possible to identify some of the orders which came from the Sultan in person. In the registers of important affairs, which contain the rough drafts of decrees, 44 the clerks have added the note, with the imperial rescript against some of the entries. This indicates that the texts incorporate the Sultan's written command, which he presumably made on a submission which he received from the council. These imperial rescripts might refer to great matters of state, such as the measures to be taken against Suleiman's rebel son, Bayezid, in 1559-60, or matters which, to the modern mind, seem fairly trivial, such as a command in the same year to block up the windows in Cairo which enabled men to see into the women's sections of public bathhouses. These imperial rescripts make it possible to identify at least some of the items of council business which drew the Sultan's attention. In the end, however, it is impossible to estimate with any certainty the degree of the Sultan's control over the decisions of his council and his role in the day-to-day government of the empire. When he attended the council in person, frequently before the mid-15th century, rarely thereafter, he could exercise his authority in person. From the second half of the 15th century, when he did not attend meetings, he made his will known in discussions with the Grand Vizier, by sending messages through the Aga of the Gate, or when the council members presented him with the results of their deliberations. A series of written memoranda from the Grand Vizier to the Sultan also survive from the time of Murad III onwards. 45 The absence of such documents from earlier reigns may mean simply that they have not survived. It is likely, on the other hand, that they indicate the withdrawal of the Sultan from direct contact with the Grand Vizier and the Imperial Council. In one of these, where the Grand Vizier requests an audience with Ahmed I, the Sultan refuses, with the handwritten note, "You should inform me on paper," 46, suggesting that face-to-face meetings between Sultan and Grand Vizier had become rare. It is, however, likely that different sultans adopted different styles of rulership, and that practices changed even within a reign. Murad III, for example, is reported to have attended council meetings in person during the early part of his reign, while in the latter part, he became increasingly withdrawn. Furthermore, although law books of the 16th and 17th centuries define the Grand Vizier as the Sultan's absolute deputy and envisage the monarch as conducting the government solely through the Grand Vizier, and so through the Imperial Council, this was probably never the case. The Sultan had closer contact with the pages of the Privy Chamber, the Aga of the Gate, the Aga of the girls, or with other courtiers than he did with the Grand Vizier, and these too could petition the Sultan on their own or somebody else's behalf. He might, too, be more inclined to take the advice of his mother, a concubine, or the head gardener at the helm of the royal barge than of the Grand Vizier. The advice writer, Kochi Bey, who presented a treatise to Murad IV in 1631-2, regarded the interference of courtiers in the government as a recent evil, commenting that the Grand Viziers after Dervish Mehmed Pasha and Nasa Pasha of necessity obeyed and agreed with the inner courtiers, and did not spare their efforts to do whatever they wanted in Apas. This, however, seems unlikely. There can have been no time when those in attendance on the Sultan's person did not influence his decisions.